Marhaban, assalamu alaikum, Dr. Gray. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm so delighted to have you here with us. And I must admit that it does feel a bit strange for me to call you Dr. Gray because I've always fondly known you as Khala Tamra. And just provide a bit of background to our audience that rewind to 2005. I first met Sheikha Tamara in Damascus. And at the time I was going through quite a bit of religious angst. And I remember distinctly sitting on the couch with you and you just hashed out all of the answers to the questions that I had related to Aqidah and all of these yaqeen issues I had until eventually they were assuaged. And alhamdulillah, like that time period was so pivotal for me in my spiritual evolvement. So I'm just very, very grateful for that time and everything that you did for us at the time. So, and mashallah, like now you're here on US soil. And please go ahead and tell us more about who you are and what you do.
Well, yes, as you said, alhamdulillah, now I'm here on US soil. I spent 20 years in Damascus. It was a beautiful part of my life. It was where I wanted to live out my life, but Allah had other plans. So I was there for 20 years studying and, as you know, teaching and working in that sort of field of, I don't know what we would call it, I suppose, Islamic tarbiyah and growth. And then when the war happened, I came back to the United States. I moved to Minnesota where my family is. I went back to school. I got a doctorate. And it was during that time I took a tour across North America, met women across North America, Muslim women. And as I was trying to decide what I was going to do, as I realized that my trip to America was not going to be as short as I originally intended, I started thinking about, okay, what is the best way to take advantage of my time here, or to give back, to bring what I took from Syria and give it here. And that's when I started Rabata. And Rabata is an organization that includes online academic learning. It includes publishing. The thinking is around positive cultural change within community and without. And I went back at that point to get my doctorate so that I could support that work and be ready to do work that I wasn't that familiar with necessarily, especially in nonprofit management and leadership. And at this point now it's a very significant time of life for me, because in January I will turn 40, Islamically, of course. I'm far beyond 40, but I will turn 40 Islamically, and the organization will turn 10. So there's something really unique about this year for me, and I'm still contemplating its significance. So yeah, alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, alf mabruk. So let's first jump into the broad topic of marriage. And gender roles is a huge topic at the moment. And we hear a lot that men accuse women of not knowing how to be women. And then you have women who say, well, men don't know how to be men. And do you believe that us as Muslim women, that we have adopted this feminist rhetoric? And yes, how do we understand what real gender roles are or should be?
Okay, so there are some different layers of this question. One of them is, do I believe that we as an ummah have adopted feminist rhetoric? Frankly, I don't think we as an ummah really understand what feminism is. We use the term as a way to complain about women's behavior. And instead of, okay, so I'm just going to leave that there for a minute. I'm come back to it. And then the other aspect, the other question that you asked me, or the other part of this is, do women know how to be women and men know how to be men? And then what do we think about, what are the Islamic roles in those places? So these are multi-layered things. I want to start with the term feminism. Feminism is a Western term that attaches itself to a number of different ways of looking at the world. Any ism is a lens that one puts on in order to understand the world. So environmentalism, we're looking at the world through the concern for the environment. Any ism does that, whether it's an economic one like capitalism or socialism, etc. Feminism is another way to look at the world, and there are about 25 to 40 different types of feminisms. So when I say that Muslims don't fully understand what that is, I mean that in an academic way. It's a word used in academia that is misused by Muslims to mean angry women, and etc. Now, feminism is a theory that we need to understand its impact on the world. And then in understanding its impact on the world, to see what impact it has had on the Muslim Ummah, just like any other Western thinking, any other global thinking, we need to understand what it is in order to see its impact on our Ummah. And I include in that Christianity, because Christianity has impacted our Ummah in ways we can't imagine. Modernism and postmodernism, which have also impacted us greatly, and in some cases very negatively, in many cases very negatively. But the flip question of that is, well, what are the male and female, so to speak, roles in Islamic traditionalism? And this is a really interesting question because it's a very modern question that has been pushed by a modernist agenda that has something to do with the feminist agenda, that we're even asking this question. I think traditionally, men and women had some sort of understanding of their role in society, and that their individual person could expand that role based on class, economics, intelligence, and what was available to them. So we have some vast changes in society today. Those changes are more money available to men and women alike, more opportunities available to men and women alike. I was just talking today with someone about how just the very process of making sure that the family is fed has become so much easier. We buy food from the grocery store. The way we cook it is quick, and then people eat it. And even like the whole process from the getting the food to the cooking the food to the eating the food to the, excuse me, but the, getting rid of the food, so to speak, all of that is very easy for us today, and therefore our lives have changed. That's just one example, from refrigeration to ovens to microwaves to vacuums, all of this stuff. So life has changed a lot. Now, when we look at the ways of the companions and the tabi'een, we see that the way of the way of life, of living life, was something shared. Dr. Zainab Alwani spoke on a panel with me last week, and she talked about how the Muslim family, the Muslim husband and wife, are a team together, and how we need to keep remembering that we are a team. And I was really moved by that word. And it's not a fancy word, like it's something we should know on our own. But when we look back at the way the Prophet interacted with his wives, the way the companions, not all of them, but many of them did, the way that many of the tabi'een did, and the early rhetoric around family structure, we really see a team to bring this family forward in order to live our lives in a healthy way and worship Allah and serve Allah and raise a Muslim family. Now, that will manifest itself differently in different places. And one beautiful thing about Islam is that we get to decide together what we want. There is no rule that says, for example, let's say Tala and Tariq got married, all right? Tala has studied medicine and she really wants to practice medicine. Tariq is an entrepreneur and he's been very successful and he's got his businesses rolling. And together they decide, you know what? You're going to work in a hospital, Tala, and I'm really happy working from home, running my businesses, and I'm happy to do childcare. Tariq decides this. Perfectly Islamic. They decided it together. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The problems comes when there is no teamwork between husband and wife. And when there's no teamwork, people like to go back and say, well, what are my rights? And what is my absolute right? And here is where we enter into issues of care and finance. And it gets sensitive for people because some would feel like, no, I am taking care. I am providing for the family, some men, whereas someone might say, no, you're not, etc. So I actually think that women do know how to be women and men do know how to be men in general. I find that Muslim men around the world in general are generous, are thoughtful, are hardworking. They're very much, if we're thinking about Muslim men in many countries around the world, they're very much oppressed and abused by their governments and dictatorship governments that make them feel like they cannot do what they need to do to take care of their family. They're struggling a lot. That would not be in Western countries, but that's generational trauma. And Muslim women also around the world are caring and loving and wonderfully generous people. So that's the big picture. Now, when we get to individuals, do we have individuals that struggle with humanity in general? Absolutely. And when anyone is struggling with their own humanity, they need to get help on a personal level. But I don't think we have a sociological problem. I don't. I think that we have some issues. We have the Red Pill movement. We have other movements within our community that are pushing and pulling. But I think in general, Muslims are really good and they want to build families of happiness. They want happiness and peace. And they're looking toward Islam for help in that. And only they're being given direction that is often misstrued to be sort of stringent in one way or another, which Islam doesn't stand and hold particular roles. Islam does not ask us to be milk bottles. We have to be milk bottles. We get to be our individual selves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us as, and interact with our families in that way, in good communication and in teamwork.
And what would you say to, I hear many, many men, Muslim men, complaining that women don't know how to accept leadership and that they are entitled, and that they don't know how to obey. And I must admit that this word obedience is quite a cringe-worthy word for most women. Especially, it's hard for women to obey if she's contributing to the financial expenses, the finances of the house, the upkeep of the house. So what do you say about this very common complaint that women do not allow men to lead, and then also about obedience?
In business, when you study business, I've been doing a lot of reading around leadership in business. I have a doctorate in leadership, just to give oomph to my answer. In leadership, when you have a situation where you are called upon to be a leader, whether you are hired as the president of a company or a coordinator or a manager or whatever, when you are called upon to be a leader, the fault is always with you. So in business, like if you're a manager, now manager is not the top leader in an organization. A manager manages what they're given to do. And if she fails or he fails at that, he doesn't or she doesn't get to say to the director or the CEO, oh, I have a problem with the employees. They have to go back and say, no, I take full responsibility. So if men are out there saying, and as a group, oh, women aren't listening, I suggest that they need to, that anyone who says that, who says my wife doesn't obey or follow my leadership, needs to think about their leadership, because we are not a religion of control. We're not a religion of harshness. We're not a religion of not noticing that a person is a person. We are a religion of absolute humanity and teamwork. You said something about it's hard when she's contributing to the family. There are scholars, including Tariq Swaydan, who talk about how qawama itself is removed when women are contributing to the needs of the household. Now, to me, that's a really interesting point, because if we're going to accept that as a truth, then we have to say, well, then does that mean that the particular type of obedience or agreement is around the use of finances? Now I'm thinking out loud with you here. I am happy to set that whole thing aside and say that we as a team need to work together And if we are going to define qawama as responsibility, then if there's a problem with interaction, the problem lies with the one who's claiming that qawama. In other words, if leadership isn't working, then you need to work on your leadership. And I would lean into Dr. Zainab Alwani's words around teamwork. I think the Quran pushes us to teamwork and pushes us to be working together and understanding that we need to lead our families together. We all will have roles to play depending on the family. There's a lot of complicated issues today. And to think that as an ummah, we are struggling with words like, my wife doesn't obey me. What even is that? Like, what are you asking her to do or not to do? And are you understanding her as a person? Are you interacting with her as a human being? Are you giving to her what she needs from you? Are you supporting her individuality and her own needs? Or is this some sort of entitled concept where do this thing? Well, I mean, what even is that? That's not family. That doesn't even work in business.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they're saying, because some of the people I've heard this from are actually very level-headed men. They're saying that we do mushawara, I negotiate with my wife, but at the end of the day, just like a CEO of a company, I need to have the last say. Like, I am going to pass the judgment, and I don't want to keep having this, butting heads all the time. We've got to have a discussion about every single point. It's draining when I'm just trying to execute and get things done here. So these aren't like manipulative necessarily, like hardcore controlling men per se.
This is the first time I hear this idea that something like that is widespread. I would say that those individuals need, it could be that there's some need for therapy there. Maybe the women need therapy about their own ability to trust and let go. Sometimes, women can have control issues as well. It's not only men who have control issues, women can have control issues. And when you have control issues, you make life miserable for everybody, no matter who you are. So it could be just that there's some therapy needed here. When we're talking about individual family issues, it's just really a shame to try to find a solution in law. You can't stop crime with law. You only punish the criminal. The law is there to help the people understand what is right and what is wrong. But what stops crime in a society is the environment and the culture and what people accept and don't accept and the way people interact with one another. So families become healthy, not from the law. The law is there to help us understand, but we become healthy because of our cultures, our healthy personality, our own clarity on our relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc.
Right. So I guess it is more complex, and we've got to look at individual situations. My last question related to the topic of marriage itself is that I have women approach me and they say, well, I'm asking you, Usada, what would you say? I'm in a marriage, my husband doesn't beat me, there's no pornography or infidelity involved. I'm just totally disconnected. I am not happy. What do I do? Like, do I just have sabr and just trudge on? What would you say to such a woman?
I mean, this is what khula is for. So she certainly has a fiqh right for khula in that case. And that would mean that she's going to give back her mahar and be released from the marriage. Now, what would I say to her? It depends on how that is affecting her spiritually. It depends on, are there children or not? Is this a life season? Is this a season of life? Is there something else going on? Are his parents sick? Or God forbid sick. Sorry, I don't mean that like as a cold thing, but is there an economic problem in the family right now? Has he lost his job? Is this a seasonal thing where someone is under enormous stress? Have you lost a child? Did you lose a pregnancy? And is there something there that you can work on? And you might say that this will take some time, but we can get this back. In which case, I don't think I would say, the sort of proverbial have patience, but rather put the marriage on project level and see what you can do. In fact, I read something once. This is not an Islamic, it was not an Islamic book. And I don't remember where I read it, but I thought it was really insightful. It was speaking to people in troubled marriages. And it said, the advice was, when you feel I want a divorce, make that the starting point of doing everything you can to make the marriage good. Project level, or even if it means working on yourself. Because then when and if you do leave the marriage, you will always be able to say, I did everything I could. So you'll never have regret. And I think that's one thing I have seen women who are pining for the husbands that they left. They really miss them. So it is something to be really thoughtful about. Is this seasonal? There's a right, no problem. But is it seasonal? Is it something she's going to regret? What's going to happen when the children are grown? Holidays, how is she going to feel about that? How's she going to feel if he gets remarried? Like, there's just a lot of stuff that she needs to work through. I wouldn't make a quick decision based on how she feels now. But I'm not saying that what I mean by that is just that proverbial be patient and do nothing and wait to see if it gets better. I think she should work hard and think and maybe have some therapy around her own self. Maybe some of that missing is what she just needs to do for herself and not something she'll get from a man ever.
Now, moving on to the topic of trying to get married. So there are hundreds of women out there, as you know, who are single, very eligible. They cannot get married. It seems to be pretty much like an international crisis. And since these women, it is so challenging for them, the pool is so small, they are now often willing to relinquish their right, with, for example, their nafaqah right. And so you have these women who are now willing to accept scraps, which might mean having a secret marriage or relinquishing their nafaqah right. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just given the kind of desperate situation that people find themselves in.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I think that when we say that we're desperate, that we have raised the importance of marriage to a place that it shouldn't be. We should never be desperate for something of the dunya. We should be desperate for Allah, desperate for a relationship with Allah. We should never be desperate for something of the dunya. The marriage is very important. It's something that we biologically long for. So it's a very natural thing to long for it and to want it and to wish for it. My suggestion is that women who are not married and wish to be married, that they live their life fully and do their best to fulfill themselves in as many ways as they can, including building rich and beautiful relationships that have suhbah with other women friends, etc., and be open to marriage from those whom otherwise they might not accept, including those who have been married before and have children, those who are older than them. Like, look at your red lines and decide what are the real red lines. When you say someone's giving up their right to nafaqah or they're going to be a secret wife, like, to me, those two things are, to go into secrecy should be a red line that we don't cross, because there's some question there around the validity of that marriage. If we are talking about, I have plenty of money, well, what's the deal here? Like, is this guy, he doesn't have money? Is that what's going on? Or he doesn't have a house? No problem. Like, if she's saying, well, I own a house and I found a really decent guy. He can't provide a house for me or a car, but I can. Make sure you do a really good prenup so that you don't end up losing that stuff, because there is a lot of marital property law in a lot of states where that could be a scary thing. But make sure you get a really good prenup, and you like him, go for it. Like, why not? But giving up rights that make the marriage, that question his commitment to the marriage, don't cross that line. You don't need to marry someone who's not really fully committed, who's like, like that.
Like, I've spoken to men who've said they want their main wife, the one who will raise the kids and things, And then they would be open to having a second or third marriage, not secret, public, but those women are successful. They have their own careers. They actually don't have a requirement for him to provide nafaqah because they are just seeking male companionship. And so something about this doesn't sit well with me because it, first of all, to me, it seems like a dhulm to the first wife, who's the one who's kind of like the maid wife. And she has to stand back and watch her husband have these other marriages with women who are willing to say, it's okay, you don't have to pay me anything as long as we can go on trips together and whatever. So that dynamic is problematic. And I've made men who feel justified in that. And there are women who will go and do that because they would rather have something small than nothing.
That's what I mean by don't bring your desperation and of the dunya. Don't be desperate for anything of the dunya. But the idea of going to a marriage and saying there won't be children is also la yajuz. Like that's actually a really important thing where it is not okay for a husband to say to his wife, you cannot have children. Like she has the right to children. So if he, and very often when a woman gets married, even if before and she's like, I don't want children, when she's married, she starts to long for and crave for children. And so it's very important when you go into a marriage. Now, of course, there's a lot of infertility issues, and some couples suffer from infertility. That's a separate issue. But we should go into a marriage expecting that children and family will come. It's not a game. Marriage is not a game. It's a beginning of a Muslim family, and it's not to fulfill this personal desire, whether a man or a woman. It's to build a Muslim family. It's to sacrifice for another person and many other little people as they start to grow. And it is to like that little family that then will interact with other families. So yeah, no, I don't. It's not a game. And if we start treating marriage like a pretend dating thing, that's just we can play games with Allah's law and dunya, but we're not playing games with Allah in the afterlife. And so we want to be really careful about that. I don't agree at all with any marriage that is not legal by the government that the country people are living in the country, which means that if there is polygamy, in my opinion, that second wife should be in another country where she has legal rights. She has legal rights to insurance, social security, to inheritance, to be seen as his legal wife by the government of that country. And otherwise, there's zulm of a lot of zulm in different spaces and different places.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a bit about suhba, but I'd want to unpack this further because grief. So there are many women out there who suffer from a tremendous amount of grief because it's the grief that they will never marry, never conceive. And it's that realization that despite wanting this thing so badly, Allah might not ordain it for me. Just like some people will never have freedom. Some people will never have, go to a certain college and be educated, etc. They are, and that's the reality of life, that like, how do we attain this rida, this sense of contentment that this is where God has placed me, and I'm going to live my life with grace and peacefulness, despite this desperate need that I have never been fulfilled. If you could just unpack that more.
It's a trial. It's a trial. Qadar, in all of its ways, is one of the trials to humanity. Some people's qadar is they're sick. They have terrible illness and a terrible long-term, lifelong illness. Some people's qadar is in physical, like an injury or a paralysis. Some people's qadar is they do get married, but they can't have children. Some people's qadar is they have narcissistic parents or a narcissistic parent. Usually it's not two. Some people's qadar is something that is what we have on this earth that we're dealing with. And Sha'rawi, rahmatullah alayhi, the great mufassir of Egypt, I am not quoting him directly, but in the meaning of something that he said, he says, everyone's qadar ends up the same over their lifespan of what they can deal with and what they can't. Some people deal with mental health issues. Other people deal with great neglect from family members. People are dealing with a lot. This is the way of the world. So if it is in someone's qadr not to get married, then it's very important that she walks a path of worship of Allah, like realizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge, have tawakkul, and know that perhaps getting married would have been not fulfilling, not everything that you're imagining, but actually hard. I have a friend who has a child with Angelman syndrome. Very, very difficult syndrome. The child is almost 30, and she has the mental capacity of a 1.5-year-old and the physical strength of a very, very, very healthy 22-year-old or whatever. And I want to tell you something, that I look at this friend and I think, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, had Allah given me this as a trial? May Allah forgive me but I don't know. I just don't know I don't know. And my friend says, Alhamdulillah, at least I'm raising one child of Jannah. She's like she's casting shade on her other kids. It's a joke. She's loving and caring and amazing. Well, one who is longing for children, are you ready to have a child with Angelman syndrome? Are you ready are you ready for this? It's not, we have this Hollywood vision of life. I want what I want, and I want it in a particular way, with a particular house, with a particular man, with a particular style of that man as well. Like I want him to have a certain look and a certain way and a certain, no, khalas. And if somebody wants to get married, they're getting married. You don't have to be a second wife. There are men out there that have children that are not as beautiful as maybe some women hope for, that are maybe older, that are maybe heavier, that are maybe whatever. I mean, more traditional. Maybe they don't want, I think if we go back to your original question, it could be that many women are really afraid to marry very traditional men because they don't want to live a very traditional life. Okay, make up your mind. If you don't want to, I want a man, but I don't want a traditional life. I'm only finding men who want traditional life. Okay, choose. It's okay. Like, there are choices that we make. We need to be okay with them. We can't be angry about our qadar if we're saying, because I didn't get that perfect man to marry. There's no perfect man. There's no perfect woman. We're all a big mess. And we just have to learn how to manage with where we are and who we live with. I had a student one time who married, subhanAllah, she married a man who had never had children. She became his fourth wife. He divorced the others. The others divorced him because after they got married, they wanted children. At first, they didn't know it was him. Second one, they still didn't know it was him. They lived in the village in Syria. Took a long time to realize it was him. In general, village people often think it's the woman. Anyway, she married him knowing he can't have children, and did that on purpose because she had a different vision for her life. After she got married, she told me, I don't know what happened to me now that I'm married. I really want a child. I'm dying. I really want a child. He was much older than her as well. Anyway, she did IVF and she did have a child, alhamdulillah. But when I look at her life and who she agreed to marry, most people wouldn't marry him. He was the same age as her father. He was her father's friend. And he had been married a number of times before. And, he couldn't have children. It was known he cannot have children. And, financially, he had a small house, mashallah, but a one-roomer. So I've digressed from the point, but the same question can be asked about any part of our life, and we really have to work on the attitude that we have in life in general, and recognize that when we feel entitled, that's when we grow bitterness. If we can get rid of our sense of entitlement, that I deserve ABC, there's some biological longing that happens. It happens. But this idea that I deserve, or I have a right to, how did I not get the thing that I have a right to? Who has right to anything? Allah has given us everything. We should be sitting in gratefulness from the morning to the night not whining about the few things we didn't get, even if that thing feels important. And by then, who says you can be a good wife or a good mother? Who knows? Like, for real, like, why do we think we're going to be a fantastic, especially since we live in a selfish time? I would disagree with people saying people can't be women and people can't be men, but I would agree if you ask the question like this: are people too selfish to get married and be parents? I'd say maybe. Maybe. Maybe they are. Maybe we just are too selfish to be married and have children because we're so thinking about ourselves, self, that the idea of sacrifice that is necessary to build a happy family is a struggle for most people. Men, women alike. This is not unique to men or women.
Some people almost believe that their rank would be increased by virtue of being a mother or a wife. And so it's in a way, it's kind of linked to a low self-esteem that I don't have much value if I never marry or I'm not a mother. So you've spoken about this before, and I would love for you to go into it about what is true worth as a woman in terms of what is a woman's true worth and in this reality that we are in.
Well, when people quote the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that getting married is nisf al-iman, they have this idea that if I get married, I get to increase my iman. That's not true. The reason that iman is increased is because one nafs is going against the other, and you're working on your nafs. So that doesn't happen if you're not working on your nafs. And don't worry, Allah will send you other ways to work on your nafs in life so you can increase and grow spiritually. We have, especially I would say in Desi communities, linked human value to wife and motherhood, and that comes from the Hindu religion. And so we need to understand where it's coming from so that we can rid ourselves of it, because we don't want to take on aqidah of Hinduism, nor do we want to take on aqidah of Christianity or any other religion that isn't the pure tawheed of Islam. And when we talk about the value of women, the value of women is as the value of man. It is equal to how valuable are we to Allah in our work on this earth. It doesn't matter where we're working. If we have a family or we're working in community, how are we praying? How are we contributing to the betterment of this earth? Gender is irrelevant here, or biological sex is irrelevant here, is the way I should say that. What is relevant is my relationship with Allah, my himmat deen, how am I working for this religion? There's a lot of work to do. The most valuable resource to the Muslim community, in my opinion, is the single woman. She is the woman with time and energy and money. And if she has himmat deen, we could flip this world and make it a world that is an incredibly beautiful world, a world that really walks on this sirat al-mustaqim, and it's a decorated one that everybody wants to come to. But as long as we're sitting around pining away for what we don't have and wasting our energy and time on what isn't valuable, and we have to not listen to the recording. Somebody said to the words of people that make us feel like whatever we're doing, it's not good enough because we're not married. May Allah send, it's okay to say, Ya Allah, send me a good husband. But then when that dua is finished, get up and get your work done, get up and do your stuff. And if you got a parent or a relative or somebody telling you, oh, you're not married, oh, you're not married, oh, you're not married, you just don't fuss. Just say that they're worried about you. They love you, and they have their own cultural trappings of what it means to be a full human being. But that's not the Islamic way of thinking. Full humanness does not come from marriage or lack of it. Full humanness comes from our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our role is Khalifat al-Ard. So when we are on this earth and taking care of the world and what Allah has put in front of us, that's our role. And as well as we do it is our value. And it's not, how are we interacting with the life Allah has given us? So we're just sitting around and whining all the time and complaining all the time. Certainly we're not adding value to the world, but I mean, and that's the only way that we're not, if all we're doing is wasting time complaining.
Thank you. Now, for women who are single and divorced, how do we support them?
Well, I mean, there are so many different categories, right? So single and divorced can be those who have had trauma in their divorce. They're grieving what could have been, but didn't happen. I really want to recommend that women who have been divorced, if they have not gotten therapy, grief therapy, even if it's a happy divorce, like even if it's, this is a person I wanted to leave, you should still have grief therapy because you're grieving what could have been. So number one is get therapy. Make sure you're in therapy to unpack your feelings around that. The second is financial questions around, I mean, the second group is, is the woman a single mother? Is she taking care of those children at home on her own? How involved is the ex-husband? I will say that if there are children, the ex-husband remains their father forever, and it's really dangerous to, and it's very un-Islamic to use children as a weapon against them. So be very careful of that. Put children first, always. Always children are first. And even before, like, as I'm saying to myself, who's first, me or the children? It's 100% the children. Before my own feelings, before my own ideas, before how I feel about something, the children come first. And that needs to be a daily rule. And even when it's hard, even when it's like, I want my children to know how terrible their father was to me. No, 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 no. No, not necessary. My parents, they're not Muslim, but they're divorced. They got divorced when I was about 12, 13 years old. And behind closed doors, it was messy. But in front of us, I never heard a bad word from either one of them about the other. And I noticed it. I noticed that I didn't hear a bad word. Ever. In fact, my mother said something now she's remarried many, many years ago. It's a long time ago. I mean, 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago, I was 13, 40 something years ago, 45. And she said something, not bad about my father, but just something, a very lightweight thing and I was like, it reminded me that she never says anything negative about him. And that is so valuable for your children, even your adult children. I mean, I'm almost 60 years old. So absolutely do not allow your children to be used as a weapon. If he's using them, don't use them. Like, don't respond. It takes two to tango, so to speak. And then my third piece of advice is, get over it and move on with your life. I mean, yalla, get on with your life now. If your divorce is an unhappy divorce, you wanted to stay married, well, you're not now. So move on. That happened and it happened. So now go forth and live your life. Go back to school, get another degree, see what you can do. What are you going to have fun doing as work? What are you going to have fun in contributing to society? What's going to be something that gives you energy and makes you happy? Do it. Do it. If that's a simple thing like having a formal tea party with your friends, or more complicated like getting another master's degree and another PhD, do that. And remember to stay focused on Allah. So everything that you're doing is in order to grow yourself and grow this ummah in a beautiful way. Even if it is a master's degree in theater, like that can be used for Allah. So make sure that you are always thinking about that goal, that deep goal, and get the therapy that you need. But otherwise, guard yourself from bitterness. Guard yourself from bitterness. There's a lot of hurt in divorce, but bitterness is allowing that hurt to continue. And you don't want to give him or his mother, or whoever it is that's causing the problem, that power over you.
Tamara, I know that you have personal experience with divorce in your immediate family. How has that been for you, and what has that taught you about relationships?
Oh, interesting question. I think one thing that it taught me is that it's very important as a parent to, it taught me, it's hard, I'm struggling to find the words of what it taught me, because I don't have another daughter to marry off, but if I did, or what I advise to my friends is ways to like look out and see who this guy is, because it's so painful to marry someone who is going to surprise you in his way of being. I think, what have I learned about relationships? I've learned that alhamdulillah for Deen al-Islam. For my daughter, I think I can feel comfortable saying that in the early days when she first decided to get a divorce, she said to me, because I know that this religion wants me to. It was very clear. I mean, it was clear to all of us, but I'm just happy that she had that early feeling. I think that marriage it's something of bringing families together. So when it's the whole families that come together, and the breaking of that family later, and when it gets later, can be really, really painful. In the earlier days, I think it's easier, frankly. And if someone who discovers early that this guy or this woman is just it's not going to work, that's much easier. Once families get intertwined, once there's children, the pain is increased for everyone, including grandparents and everybody else, because it's a long-term broken family. And it is a broken family. Like, it's broken in that, and things change in how people can interact. Subhanallah. I don't know. I think the other thing I would say is that I have learned that nothing is more important than a relationship with Allah, that nothing on this earth is guaranteed, and you can work really hard to do the right thing, but things might not work out that way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is first. Hayk dunya, they say, such is the life of this world. And we just do our best to care for ourselves and the people around us, and keep walking on this path, and remember that this path is full of beauty, even when there's pain and difficulty.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful advice at the end about the relationship with Allah is at the forefront of everything. Khala Tamara, is anything else you'd like to add in closing?
It's this is dunya in the end. So all of these things, they're very important. We're created that they're important for us. So I'm not belittling their importance, but ultimately in the end, this is dunya. And so we're all working towards something much greater. And we want to stay clear about that every day, whether in a marriage or outside of one. Stay really clear about that, what that real goal is. Inshallah.
Thank you so much. I wish you and your family all the best. And I hope that I see you soon, inshallah.
Yes, Ameen, inshallah, very soon.
And people should register for Rabata. I'll put all that information for people to find you, inshallah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.